All right, so when we're looking at the plan of the German princes, we are seeing the chance to wrestle the power away from the Pope in the eyes of the people. And the German princes already knew that the people were very, very attuned to the ideas of Martin Luther. And so they call Luther and they make him one of the priests of their castle so that he is there with them. And he feels like he's being listened to. And so they go ahead and when Rome hears about the ideas of Martin Luther, they're interested. They don't like the fact that he's going above his bishop. So they send him a letter saying, "Hey, come to Rome and we'll talk about it." But that letter gets brought to the German princes, who tear it in half and throw it away. And then go to Martin Luther and like, geez, I wonder why Rome is not answering you. You might want to send them another letter, right? And so Martin Luther writes another letter and sends that to Rome. And the German princes are like, yeah, I got it. I'll put it in the mail for you. And they ripped that in half. So what they do is the German princes cut off the communication between Martin Luther and Rome. So now you have two sides getting angrier and angrier at each other because they do not feel like the other is paying attention to them. And this is kind of how this built up in with all the scheme of these German princes. And in the meantime, the people of Germany are more and more in tune with what Martin Luther is talking about. And um, so by the time that Martin Luther and Rome finally do get together, the Rome doesn't want to hear anymore. They're furious. And Martin Luther is like, he's not willing to talk either. So when Martin Luther goes to Rome, they excommunicate him and they kick him out of the church. And in the meantime, when the German princes hear that, they start to take the ideas of Martin Luther and they mm, form it into a church. So the time that a very dejected and sad Martin Luther comes back to Germany, he is now like the leader of this church that he did not found. And so the thing gets builds momentum and the people kind of lift him up and they and this and the Protestant church kind of develops in this way. Um, Now Luther proposes a couple different things here. He proposed that it's not just the actions that get one to heaven, that get salvation, but our faith in God alone. And this the great banner cry sola fide, which means only faith, not actions. Now it doesn't mean that, doing good things is doesn't matter to God. That is not not what this is about. When sola fide is shouted, it means it's an answer to the indulgence issue, right? Where you could do these actions to get into heaven. Actions. And it wasn't about the goodness and the kindness of the spirit of a person when they're helping the poor or helping the sick. So, so when we talk about sola fide, it means simply that God's faith and faith in God is the only thing that saves us. Um, Now, of course, because one has faith, one will go out and do good works, and that's the idea of the Protestant churches. Now, he also understood that the Bible was the only true source of revelation, as opposed to the history of the church and the Bible. Now, interestingly enough, we have to say that just saying like the Bible is the only way that God speaks to us, and God doesn't speak to us in the church the way that it always has. This can't really be. Um, this is not really pretty. This is not really good way of thinking. Because first of all, what came first, the church or the Bible? And the answer is the church came first. We've already learned that the Bible wasn't even developed until like two generations 2 to 3 generations of Christians had already existed and worshiped and lived and died, right? And then the Bible kind of developed into its organized situation. So to say, well, God didn't speak then, before the Bible was written, that doesn't make sense. Also, the Bible ends as far as the things that are included in the Bible. Nothing is really included past maybe 120 AD. Are we suggesting that God doesn't speak to the world? God stopped talking to the world at 120? So to say sola scriptura or only scripture doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. To say all I need is the Bible and I don't need anything else. Everything I need to know about my faith and about how to live in this world is in the Bible. That doesn't really hold water. Um, it's a process. It's God is constantly speaking and revealing Himself to the church, telling us, with new cultures and new way of living, new technologies, morality and faith have to constantly be refreshed and renewed. So to just say all I need to know is what's in the Bible, um, it doesn't really, it's tough to apply. So the rest of the Reformation, we talk about the British Reformation here. Um, you're going to have Henry VIII, but before Henry VIII, we want to cover the Counter Reformation. This is the Great Council of Trent, where the Catholic Church says enough and enough with all this Protestantism. We're reestablishing uh, our primacy and that we are in charge and we are going to excommunicate anybody who teaches any kind of heresy. So it's basically the church getting really, really strict, which really is not, it's the opposite of unification and coming together. It solidified the Latin language for all of church worship services, and it emphasized that the clergy were the mediators to God, that you can't get to God unless it's through the clergy, almost like a ladder. Like if we were on the bottom rung, we'd have to go through the priests and the bishops in order to get to God. This theology continues until the 1960s. So the church really gets stuck, sticks their foot in the ground and says, we're not moving. And we are tough and we'll excommunicate anyone who disagrees with us. Not really a good look. So in England, you have Henry VIII. Now, Henry VIII was a good Catholic, and he was very, very dutiful, and he listened and did what he was told and got along, so much so that he was named when he became the king, Defender of the Faith, which was a huge title, right, for his tireless work on behalf of the church. Now, his older brother had been king, and he had married Catherine of Aragon, this princess from Spain. Now, again, remember, Britain and Spain were these superpowers, and so by marrying Catherine of Aragon, there was this bond um, with those two superpowers that would create a sense of peace, and this was the whole plan of the Pope at the time. So now, Catherine, um, who had married uh, Henry's older brother Charles, um, was not in any way uh, like in love with Charles. And when Charles died, it came on to Henry to number one be king, and number two to take the queen as his own wife. He felt obligated by that. Now this didn't go over well because they didn't love each other at all, and um, so he wanted an annulment, particularly because he fell in love with another woman, right? And it's Anne Boleyn. And so he asks the Pope, who had been his friend, he had done so much for the Pope. He says, "Can you give me an annulment? Can you break this marriage between me and Catherine? I want to get married. I finally, found somebody I love, and